two ladies at our front table are her guests. She invited them, but she also gave me the opportunity to introduce them. And both of them, by the way, are at their very first Kiwanis meeting ever. So I hope you've impressed them with your singing and with your good humor. The subject today really deals with autism and the relationship to animals. The importance of that was called to your attention in our December Kiwanis newsletter and or magazine. Most of you will remember the article there that had this as the cover page, and it is on one of the Kiwanis clubs in Arizona and their efforts to help deal with the problem of autism in children. And it reviews the disease a bit for you and called your attention to it. It states that in the March of 2014, the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta did a study of 8-year-olds in 11 different states, and that 1 in every 6 children in that 8-year-old group have autism of some type, and that is a 30% increase beyond just 2 years earlier in a similar study. So if you haven't read that, you may wish to do so. And therefore, I'm really pleased to introduce our guest today, Dr. Marguerite O'Haire, on my immediate right. And her guest today is Naomi Guerin, who is a graduate student who is from France and just arrived in the United States just before Thanksgiving. And so this will be her first Thanksgiving and Christmas in our country, and we're delighted to have her as our mutual guest. Well, Dr. O'Haire is from Atlanta, Georgia, raised in that area. She received a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from Vassar College in 2008, and then she received a Fullbright postgraduate scholarship to conduct human-animal research in Australia. She went for only a year, but she was doing such a great job, they offered her the opportunity to complete a PhD there, and so she spent several years in Australia, where her research studied the animal-assisted intervention for children with the autism spectrum disorder. And there she developed a classroom animal program that led to increases in social behaviors among children with autism disorder. At the end of that, she received a PhD from Queensland, and then she joined Purdue University just this last August as assistant professor of the human-animal interaction. And last month in New York City, she received a research fellowship award from the American Australian Association and was recognized for her collaborative research on the human-animal bond in both the United States and in America. So it is a real pleasure to introduce Maggie to you, and she will speak on the value of animals for children with autism.
I'm delighted to be here. I'll just get this set up very quickly. I'll also put a timer on so that I don't go too long and bore everyone to sleep. If I'm talking too long anyways, you can tell me to stop, but I like to have this in case. So I'm very excited to be here today.
Generally, it takes a moment to warm up. It's on its way.
I'm sure I can act out the images anyways. So there we go. We'll get started. So I'm very excited to be here today and to be invited by Gail Beck. I've just moved to Indiana from Australia, so it's very different. I already think it's too cold. I ask that you not let it get any colder than this. The place that I came from in Queensland, it never snows. In winter, it's just less hot. So it's been an adjustment, but I've been very happy at Purdue so far. And I'll tell you a little bit about the work that I've done and what I hope to continue to do. So my area is on human-animal interaction. And it really stems from what's called the BioKelia Hypothesis. And basically that's this idea that as humans we have this innate something inside of us that draws us to animals and nature. So we want to look at it, we want to be around it. And we would have grown up that way over evolution, but today we're increasingly in places like this, in buildings. This is a lovely room, but there's no animals and there's no nature. And I'm wondering what effect that might be having for people, and that's kind of what drives my studies. One example that I love to show how much people like just looking at animals is the zoo. So every year, millions of people travel, they spend money just to stare at animals during the day. And in the US and Canada, the number of people who go to zoos is more than the number of people who go to all major professional sporting events combined. So there's a huge number of people that are putting in resources just to look at animals. Also, we let animals live in our houses. So in the US, 62% of houses have a companion animal. How many people here have a pet? Okay, probably around the national average. And it's not cheap. Pets are expensive. So it's a $55 billion industry, the pet care industry. And, you know, we spend money on their food, their toys, their accessories, their medical bills. And what are they giving us in return? I mean, they're not paying rent. They're not cooking me dinner when I get home from work. Why are we putting all of this money into it? And I think these are fascinating questions that underpin what I've started to study. And there are a few really exciting findings that have come out so far on why people might have pets. One had to do with heart disease. So there was a group of people that survived a heart attack. They were in the coronary care unit. And then 1 year later, the researchers went back and found out that those who had a pet were more likely to be alive. So they actually had 1/3 the mortality rate just from having an animal in the house. Right? So it's very shocking, these findings. And what they started to look at is that it may be the way that they reduce our stress levels, because coronary artery disease can be a trigger to have a lot to do with stress. So if they can help bring that down and connect us to those around us, it might be what's related to that. And so another group of researchers took it a little further, and they thought, okay, if this is helping to reduce health problems, maybe it's linked to savings. And they found that people who have pets make less visits to the doctor, they take less medication for heart problems and sleeping difficulties. And if they put in all the calculations together, they estimated that in 1999, $3.86 billion were probably saved due to pet ownership. So these were some early studies that got people excited about this field. And ultimately, the National Institutes of Health held a workshop on the health benefits of pets. And from these kinds of findings, they made this big declaration. And they said, no future study of human health should be considered comprehensive if we don't include the animals with whom we share our homes. So I took this law to heart. I have been following it and putting it in all of my studies. I don't know if everyone else is, but I think it was a really well-put statement. And one thing is interesting, I've always quoted this and found out very recently that the person whose quote this is Gail Beck's wonderful husband, Alan Beck, who's also a professor at Purdue. So I think it's very well put, and I like to bring that up.
Yeah.
So, this is how I frame how animals might be good for us. So they can provide us direct benefits. So there's this non-judgmental support. You come home from work, your animal's always excited to see you. They don't care what you look like. They don't care if you did bad on that test or your boss hates you. They're happy to see you, and you get that unconditional love, as some people call it. And not only do they do that directly, but they also help connect you to people around you. So for example, if you're walking with a dog, you're much more likely to have someone smile and say hello than if you're just walking by yourself. There's something about an animal there that draws people together. So from this, I decided to look at children with autism. And there are a few reasons. The first one is that for children with autism, a core challenge is engaging and connecting with other people. But there are a couple studies that show that children with autism really like to hang out with animals. They seek out that contact and they feel connected with the animals. So maybe if we can use that as a stepping stone to build into connections with other people, I thought we might be able to create a program to make that happen. So I looked to see what had been done already on this area, and there's a lot in the news and in the media and in movies. I don't know if you've seen some of these. There's a book and a movie. I don't know, have many of you seen on the news, child with autism receives great benefits from animals? A few people? So it's out there in the news, but in terms of research, I decided to look through and see what had been done more carefully there. And there were 14 studies that I could find, and they were conducted around the U.S. and around the globe, even though I only looked at English language articles. If anyone speaks extra languages, you can help me find more, but this is what I was able to find in English. And they were published all over, so it's not an area where it's just one group of researchers looking at it. We have autism journals, we have alternative medicine, occupational health, equine science, or sociology. So people are publishing all over, and I tried to bring it all together to find out what has been done so far on this topic. So I wanted to find out first, what is animal-assisted intervention? What are they actually providing with these services? I wanted to evaluate the research. Can we trust these results? And finally, what are they saying happens when an animal is in these child's lives? So for the first one, it looks like everybody does something different, but in all cases, the common factor is there's an animal. Most commonly, we're seeing dogs and horses. Although some studies have other animals. I saw one with llamas, one with rabbits, and guinea pigs. Next, looking at the research so far, I'm not going to bore you with what I evaluated in the study methodology, but suffice it to say, the studies were in a very early stage, so we're not seeing these big randomized controlled trials. We're seeing really small studies, and a lot more needs to be done. And then in terms of outcomes, if we put together what they found across them, most commonly we're seeing increased social interaction, so across the studies. Also increased language and communication, some reduced problem behaviors, and some reduced stress. But the biggest thing people are finding is this increase in social interaction. So overall, does the research match what you see in the news and what you see in the movies? I'd say it's getting there. It looks like it's promising, but we have a lot more to do, and that's what I'm hoping to do in my time at Purdue, is actually put some strong research methods to these things. So the first thing I tried to do was take it back to basics and find out, is there any proof for this concept that if an animal's there, people will act differently than if it's not there? Because if there's no difference, then we should stop bothering putting them in therapy. But if there is a difference, that would be useful to know. So, a question that people who play devil's advocate might ask is, maybe it's just the fact that there's something fun and engaging, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an animal. So what could I compare animals to that would also be fun and engaging? Luckily for me, there's a $1 million industry creating fun and engaging things for children. Those are toys. So I went out and I bought the most fancy, fun toys that I could find, the hottest, the latest, what are kids into these days, and I spread it out and put it in front of them. So I had 99 children who I brought in. I did this study in Australia, and they were between the ages of 4 to 12. And I had a third of the sample had autism, and then I also included some of their classmates. And so in each classroom, I would pick the one child with autism and 2 of their classmates, and they would sit together in a group. And then that blue character right there is me. I was there for supervision. I didn't just let them run free. And they either had an animal or a toy. So in the animal condition, I was working in school classrooms, and although most of these studies, a lot of them had horses or dogs, it wasn't really feasible to just let the horse in the classroom all day. So I needed an animal that could stay in the classroom and would be easy enough for the teachers to take care of. So you may guess what that little icon is there. That's a guinea pig. So I had a pair of guinea pigs, and then all the materials you might expect when you interact with animals, feeding them, grooming them. Can anyone see? Can you see what that is there? It looks like a bunch of trash, toilet paper rolls, etc. It's not trash to children and guinea pigs. You can create things with it. So we use things like shoe boxes to make tunnels and do enrichment activities. So in the one condition, I give them the animals. In the other condition, I have all these awesome toys that I spread out in front, and they either get free time with whichever one happens to be in front of them. I tried to pick a range of ages and gender-based toys. And they had 3 times in each group, and I video recorded it all, and I had different students watch these videos and look at what things happened in the videos. I didn't tell those students anything about what I was studying because I didn't want them to have any expectations. And I looked at their social behaviors. So I compared the animal to the toy, and in terms of verbal, so that's talking to people, what I found is that when the animal is there, they're talking a lot more than when the toy is there. They're also looking at people a lot more. So children with autism don't like to make eye contact. They don't like to look at your face. But for some reason, when the animal is there, they're looking at people's faces more. So they appear to be more engaged. And then they also come into physical contact with their peers more. So they're sitting next to each other, hugging or high-fiving. So from what I found, it does appear that they're increasing in this social interaction when the animal is there. Also, I looked at what they're talking about. So are they saying things like, I'm happy, or I like this? And they're more often saying positive things when the animal is there, and less negative things. So less of, I don't like this, or I'm unhappy. I also found they're doing more pro-social behavior. So they're helping people more. They're handing someone something, or helping to carry something. And less problem behaviors when the animal is there compared to the toys. And lastly, I looked at their emotional display, and they're smiling a lot more when the animal is there, and they're laughing more. And that's compared to toys. Toys are supposed to be fun. You're supposed to smile and laugh when you're with toys, but even compared to that, the animal creates more smiling and laughing, and less frowning, crying, and whining. So this is what we saw in the videos. Then we asked the kids, how do you feel during this? And with children with autism, you don't want to ask them too many questions that require them to speak a lot, depending on their level of verbal skills. So you can give them, this is a standard measure for children to see how much they like something, and we saw a lot more of happiness during the animal condition compared to toys. So in addition to asking them, I also, as a researcher, wondered what's happening underneath. So physiologically, is there a difference when they're with the animals compared to the toys? But that creates a bit of an issue, because to get that, do you want to hook them up to wires? Do you want to take a blood sample? You know, most of it's pretty invasive, and you're not going to get into the school system and be able to do that. So I did a lot of searching around, and luckily for me, I found a creative new technology. I don't know if you noticed it on the title slide. Did you see the measurement device the child is wearing? Do you see it? Do you see it now? Yes. So it's very non-invasive, or maybe it's just that child's preference. If one child really likes cats, then maybe he's going to be better off with a cat in this kind of thing. So stay tuned. I'll let you know what we find. Other current projects I'm working on. So I've got a collaborator in Colorado. There's a neuropsychiatric special care unit for autism, and we're doing the same kind of studies with dogs and with horses. In California, I have a collaborator. We're working together for children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, and dogs. So hoping to find this similar things out with a different population. And then a United States-wide study is the Canines for Childhood Cancer study. So we're working on evaluating the effects of those programs in hospitals where the dogs come in and visit the children. Because there's actually surprisingly little research on it, even though it happens a lot. So we need to find out if it works, how it works. Otherwise, these kinds of programs can't really keep going without that kind of data. And I'm very excited about the final project that I just started working on, which is veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, because it's very prevalent in this population, and there's organizations that are starting to put out service dogs. The one I'm working with is Canines for Warriors in Florida, and there's no research that's been published on this. And in order for that to be something that people can get funding for insurance to cover, we need to have research that demonstrates what value it has. And one finding we have so far is that after people graduate with their dogs, they show 92% of them reduce the amount of medication that they're on for different issues. They also show up to 3 times as much quality time with family, reduced nightmares. So the effects are seeming really powerful, and I want to make sure that we can document this in a research setting so that there can be more funding for the individuals who need the animals. So those are kind of just a little bit of what's been happening and what I will continue to do. If you're interested in learning more, I do have a website, humananimalinteraction.org, where I put up publications or different media stories, and you can check that out. And I'd just like to say a thank you to the sponsors that have made this research possible. Without them, we couldn't do these studies. And thank you especially to you all for your patience in listening to me on this fine day, and thank you to BioKelia for inviting me.
Thanks, Maggie. Any questions?
Yes.
Have you ever taken any children with that type of disorder to an animal shelter to see how they might interact and maybe
That's a great idea.
give them volunteer opportunities there?
It's an excellent idea. I have not. I know of one group looking at going and reading to animals in the shelter as a way to increase reading skills or confidence in reading, but that would be an excellent idea. Good for the human and good for the animal, I would think. It's a good idea. Yes?
Is there anything being done on the opposite? What is happening to the dogs? What's happening to the animals?
I'm glad you asked that. That's actually one of the reasons I decided to come to Purdue, because my expertise is on studying the outcome for the human, but here at Purdue we have wonderful experts in animal welfare in the Center for Animal Welfare Science, so we're working on collaborating to study the outcome for the dog, or whatever animal it may be. There are some studies looking at dogs and their cortisol and stress levels, and so far it looks like it's nothing bad for the dog has been found yet, but it's very important if we're finding out that this is good for people, we need to know what's happening for the animal as well. And so far it seems okay, but we're going to keep looking into that.
Dr. O'Hare?
Yes.
Did you find any difference in the children's response to different animals, the horse, the dog, the guinea pig?
Good question. So there have been no studies that directly compare it. The findings are very similar regardless of the animal. It seems like there's increased social interaction whether it's a horse or a dog. But that's one thing I want to look at is in the same study with the same measures, are there differences across animals? And I look forward to sharing the answer, hopefully. Yes.
Have you read anything or studied particular animals as service animals to autistic children? I've been told that Cocker Spaniels are extremely good service dogs, and the military had a training program, and then the military dissolved that program. So do you have any research to back that up?
I don't know about that breed-specific finding. I know there are certainly organizations that do provide service dogs for individuals with autism as well as separately for other populations. And so far the findings have been very qualitative, so more case stories about individuals whose lives have benefited, but there haven't been any large-scale studies that look at outcomes of service animals for autism or post-traumatic stress disorder, and none that I've seen on breed differences. I know there are common breeds that are used, like labs and golden retrievers, I would say would be the most common. Although the organization I'm working with in Florida, Canines for Warriors, they actually source their dogs from the shelters. So they're not doing, special breeding programs. They're actually going in, finding the homeless animals and seeing which ones would be suitable. So I think it's an area that needs more study.
I'm just thinking, my daughter-in-law had 3 autistic children in her classroom.
Oh yeah.
Guinea pigs would not have been a great animal to have there, but if they had smaller dogs with the children, it might have helped.
It's very individual specific, and sometimes a larger dog is actually a good idea. If guinea pigs are not a good idea, perhaps because you're nervous that the children might be too aggressive or all over the place, then I would actually suggest a larger dog or a horse, because you want an animal that's bigger and more robust. At least that's what, I'm not sure if you know who Temple Grandin is, so she's a famous individual with autism who has written a lot of books, and she was at Purdue recently, and I did ask her, which type of dog do you think would be best, and she actually suggested larger dogs. She thinks they may have a more stable temperament and more robust. Yeah. Oh, I don't remember who was first. One of you can go.
Do the animals, not the guinea pigs probably, but do the dogs get any training before they go into these programs?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a few different certifying bodies around the U.S. For an animal to be a service dog, they go through a lot of training, and that can be expensive. Around $15,000 to train one dog. For just visiting classrooms and visiting hospitals, that's usually the owner does a certification course online, and then someone comes out and tests them, and that costs the owner about $100. But that's the only cost involved with that. But always there should be some form of certification, and there's lots of good options. Oh, but there are actually certifications for small animals too, rabbits or llamas. They do. I think they have guinea pigs as well. Ours were not certified. I think in the back.
I think you should know that it's going to get colder.
I know that. I'm going to go visit my family in Atlanta for Christmas. Yes.
Is there a residual effect for the children, say they're around the dog once a week or something? Okay, how about the other 6 days? Do they revert to back where they were, or is there sort of a buildup of a pattern of social interaction? So
I think it's both, but I think the stronger effect that I've seen so far is that it's when the animal is there. So I know of at least one study where they had service dogs in the home with children with autism, and when the dogs were there, they had lower cortisol levels, lower stress, better behaviors, and then when the dog was removed, it was still better than the beginning, but it's gone back up and not as good again. So
That's within the same day or a week later?
2 weeks.
Or?
So 2 weeks with the dog and then 2 weeks without the dog.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
there's
so
some residual.
it seems some, but it does seem it's the best when the animal's actually there.
Yesterday, I had the privilege of taking my wife to the hospital. And while I was waiting for her procedures, they came by with 2 dogs. And I thought it was very strange to have dogs in a hospital. Is that really happening here in Lafayette? Why?
Yes, it is. It is happening. So the patients always have the choice of whether or not they want the animal to enter their room or not. And there are strict rules about how often they can come and which levels they can go to. But I'm working with IU Health Arnett. They have a pet therapy visitation program that they want to evaluate the outcomes of. I think it's growing. There's not that much research on it, but it's definitely happening. And a lot of the people who say yes, they'd like the dogs to come in, find it really beneficial. And the hope is that those who say no, they don't want that, it doesn't bother them because they never have to see the dog.
Is the response the same at all age levels? Yeah, pretty much.
I think there hasn't been enough research at all age levels yet. A lot of it's with children, and then there's a great deal that has to do with going with older people, but there's not a lot on the middle adolescents or adults. So we have much to find out, many questions to answer.
I think we have to close. Thank you so much. And Dr. O'Haire, thank you for an interesting presentation. You shed a lot of light on the subject of autism and human-animal interaction. So we have a flashlight to assist you in shining more light on your future self.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Is that you? I know you like flashlight.
I know, I'm
That's
flashlight
good.
junkie. Okay, so just a few comments. We won't